Bem-vindo em Live Podcast.
So I want to continue this conversation of, Black unemployment, specifically Black men in the employment sector within the United States. So here we have an article. Let me zoom in a little bit. Here we have not an article, but really a study from the Center for Economic and Policy Research. So CEPR. The title, Addressing the Unique Labor Market Challenges of Black Men, right? And of course, this is written September 1st, 2021 by a Black man, Algernon Austin. So when you come down to this graph, right, you see men's prime age employment rates, right? So here you have white men, Hispanic men, Black men, Asian men. It's very clear that Black men have the lowest employment rate. Now, keep in mind, this is 2019. So this was as good as it's gotten for Black men in the last 20 years. As compared to other racial groups, this is how good it's gotten for them. So still, Black men are still behind, even though the economy was thriving, right? This is before any pandemic. So this is as good as it got. Now, here we have a study that is after the pandemic and basically still within the pandemic, if you want to call it that, whatever the case. So here we have the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. It doesn't really get any better than this when it comes to labor force statistics. So what are we looking at? Unemployment rates by age, sex, race, and Hispanic or Latino ethnicity. So this graph can be a little confusing, can be a little tricky. Let me break it down. Basically, these columns here are what you have the ethnicities. So you have white, Black or African American, Asian, Hispanic or Latino. And with that under, right, the column under, or the row under, I should say, you have the quarters. So this is the third quarter of 2020 and the third quarter of 2021. So these quarters, the third quarter specifically, not exactly 100% sure, don't quote me on it, but it's just around that summertime. So it starts maybe June and ends in September, just around that time frame, right? So what's important is that we look at more specifically 2021 because this is the most recent. So this is as of perhaps September 2021. We don't want to look at 2020 because everybody is pretty much doing bad. And if you look at the numbers, it was even worse for Black Americans, just as everybody else. What you have here on the rows is basically the age groups. And this is important because when it comes to unemployment, specifically for Black men, what you see is it's young Black folks that are oftentimes the highest unemployed and cannot garner an opportunity to produce wealth for themselves. So what you have here, right, this right here is the total. So this is men and women, right? Because you have here age and sex. So you have men and women in total. And then if you kind of scroll down, see the bottom, it's the men. And then you keep going down, you have women. We're not going to talk about women too much because it's basically the same pattern when it comes to at least ethnicities, right? So in terms of that, the whole complex of the gender gap, that's a whole other study, right? A whole other podcast that I gotta garner up for you guys. But we'll chime in right now on just the total, and that obviously includes women, and we'll just peek over, right? So when you have total 16 years and over, what do you have? Well, here's the total, right? Which is 5.2. So that's the average. Now, when you scroll to the white in the third quarter of 2021, you have 4.6. So they're doing above average. If you look at the Black or African American, 8.4. They're doing below average. Asian, 4.7, above average. And Hispanic or Latino, 6.2, below average. But as you can see, Blacks and are doing far worse. So if we scroll to the men, right, because that's what we were focusing on today. If we scroll to the men, and I want to look at specifically 20 years and over. If we look, this is the white column, right? Third quarter, 2021. 4.2. For Black men, 8.3. Asian men, 4.8. And Hispanic Latino, 5.4. So we have a higher unemployment rate for Black men, even in the age group of 20 and over. Now, if we want to be more specific, right, let's do 20 to 24 years, right? So here's your average, right, 9.4. Usually you see high unemployment rates in this category because most men and women, for that matter, are going to school. So they're going to college. They don't have a job yet. So here we have 9.4. For white men, we have 7.8. For Black men, we have 13.9, which is almost 14%. For Asians, we have 12.5. I want you to pay attention to that number. We're going to get to in a second. And then we have Latinos, 8.9. So you're probably saying, hey, CJ, well, Asians and Blacks have just about the same unemployment rate within the age group of 20 and 24. Well, as I mentioned, right, most individuals are going to college at this age, so they don't really have jobs, at least full-time work, right? So here's the striking part. As you get to 25 and over, right, what do we have? We have white men, 3.9. So that strikes down almost half. For Black men, we have 7.5. For Asians, look how much that decreases, 4.2. So just based off these numbers alone, you see that Asian men are being hired at a higher rate than Black men. And this is 25 and over. We'll really get to the nitty gritty in a second and show you what I'm talking about, but that's the case, 4.2. And then for Latinos, you have 4.9. So even their percentage strikes down drastically. Now, here's where the biggest underlying issue causes, 25 to 34. This is where you enter the job market and you start to accumulate your wealth. I'm in this age group right now as we speak. So I know exactly what I'm talking about when it comes to compiling wealth, making investments, starting a business, having these ideas and these different ventures. So here's the case. The average, 5.6, right? So that's all men. Here we have white men at 5%. Here we have Black men at 10%, double the unemployment rate of white men. Here we have for Asians, 3.1 within the age group of 25 to 34. So it's without question that Asian men are being hired at a higher rate, which basically gives them the opportunity to gain wealth. And then here we have for Latinos, 7%, right? So as you can see, Black men are by far the most unemployed in just about every single category you can imagine. Now, I know some of you wanted to probably interested in seeing the women category. Basically, take a screenshot or pause the video. But I didn't want to go over this. I didn't want this to be too long. Pause the video right here. Maybe you can see this, yeah? So why is it that Black men are more unemployed than the rest of the population? It's a lot of different reasons, but when it comes to the standard of racism, that's the exact definition. Really keeping Black men away from capital, keeping them away from economic gain. That's the whole system, right, of capitalism. So in order for this racist system to systematically work, you have to keep Black men away from money, right? This gives them what? Less power, right? Less land, less capital, less labor, less opportunity to produce and prosper. And I know a bit about this because I'm doing above average than the rest of the Black men in America. So I know what it means to start my own business. I know what it means to make investments. I know what it means to be able to share some of my profits with family members and so forth to help them start a business and investments and so forth, right? I'm currently in that process as we speak. So, what I find most interesting, and this is how you know the system is just inexplicably racist. I like to think of it as circles, right? Just a group of circles. if America was equal, like it said it was, right? Here you have the Black population, right? Which is approximately anywhere between 11 and 13%. It shifts. But then you have the white population. Here's this bigger circle, right? This is approximately like 60%. So here you have the small circle, and here you have the big circle. The Caucasians on this side, Blacks on this side, right? So why is it that in a bigger circle, you see that there is a higher employment rate if America was equal? Because if America was equal and we were all being hired at the same rate, wouldn't it be easier to employ this circle? This circle is 5 times greater than this circle. The Caucasian race is 5 times greater than the African Americans. So why is it that this circle is more employed than African Americans? Because they're not being hired at the same rate. It's simple. So to further my example, right, when you have this, you have the Black men in this circle, white men in this circle, if we're being hired at the same rate, you have one Black man being hired, one white man being hired, one Black man being hired, one white man being hired. Wouldn't it be reasonable to fill up this circle first if it was equitable? This circle's bigger. It's more white men than Black men in the United States. So how is this circle twice as unemployed? It's systematic. And to further prove my point, we saw the Asian population, right? Now, the Asian population is approximately anywhere between 5 and 6% in the United States. So even a smaller circle, right? And so you saw with the smaller circle, compared to Caucasians, Asians have even a lower unemployment rate than whites, which makes sense, right? Small circle, so it's easier to employ them. So there is no question that Asians are being hired at a fair, equitable rate compared to Caucasians and Blacks, right? Here we go with the Black circle again. So what's the issue? It's racism, and this is systematic. And I don't really know what the solution is other than Black people, we got to work together. So hopefully that gave you some insight. Peace.